so Bill Shorten has plenty to say. Media goes nuts and say, well, he's accepted everything that's wrong with the election result, except he doesn't really. When you actually look at what he has to say, he's part of what he said.
I mean, it pains me to realise after the election that I'd misread some of the mood in Queensland and Western Australia. There they saw some of our policies as being green left, not for the worker, not for working people. That pains me because I've spent my adult life standing up for working class people.
Despite telling James Campbell he wants to be around for another 20 years, we're supposed to believe the bloke who always dreamt of being Prime Minister and was told by everyone in the press gallery that he would be, has no plans on returning up front anytime soon.
Yeah, I have ruled it out. I've hung up my leadership running shoes. But what I also understand is you don't have to be the leader to help be a leader. And I want to be a leader for people with disabilities and their carers. I want to be a leader for the vulnerable and the marginal who are getting done over by robo-debt.
Now, I can feel the little pushback coming from lounge rooms around Australia saying, for God's sake, Paul, we've dispensed with this bloke. Why are we talking about him? Why lead the show with him? Because I just want to talk about a couple of bits of strategy that are around all of this. Because, Darren, as you know, if you want to go and do the tell-all, okay, you do the tell-all interview. You don't have to follow it up with a press conference that day when you're not the leader. It feels all very coordinated to have a lot of Bill in the zone. Now, is he doing it on a day that is a public holiday for the beginnings of a long weekend for much of the country, so he gets it out while people aren't watching? What do you think is the logic inside Shorten world that says today was the day to spill your guts?
I think it is a little bit of that. It's post-grand final in Victoria, and it's NRL grand final as we speak. So I think he was probably getting it done at a time in a long weekend where there's not a lot of, not as much attention as there might be at other times. But I'm sure that if you had just gone through a campaign, he wouldn't like a lot of the things that are said about his performance and why he lost the election. You would have a bit of an urge to say something. I quite like Bill, as you know, but I hope that he now keeps it to a minimum. I think what he's saying about representing those with disabilities, I think that class action about robo-debt is quite smart, to be honest. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
But it's all smothered by this, but also
but I don't think we'll hear that much from him. I think that's it for now.
But this isn't one and done, Adam. He did a thing on Channel 2 where he sat down with Andrew Probert and asked a bunch of questions. So you've got the feeling that there was that, there was this. There'll be, of course, him commenting after the election review comes out. It doesn't mean he's not allowed to speak. It's just today seemed to be a very strategic day to talk about it and follow it up with so much media.
Well, it was clearly a orchestrated campaign of a mea culpa moment, not as good as some of the experts in the past, such as Peter Beattie, in his mea culpa moments. But I think it's a strategy that Bill's employed, and probably the Labor Party, to try and clean himself up and dust himself off and sit back and potentially try again, despite him saying that he's hung up his leadership running shoes. I think you don't have to be Einstein to see that Anthony Albanese hasn't hit the ground running, and I don't think there's any alternate contenders there for leadership down the track for Labor. So it's an opportunity for Bill to park the franking credit issue, take a little bit of responsibility, not enough from my point of view. Do the mea culpa, as you said, the post-grand final for AFL and with the long weekends in Queensland and New South Wales. And it is a styling opportunity for Bill where I think he can frame himself in a domestic portfolio such as NDIS, as opposed to what we were talking about last week with Penny Wong, but certainly a social services portfolio, get some runs on the board. And if they are looking for another leader in Labor in the future, Bill will be ready to go.
Well, but also, again, those of us that are paying attention, and most people aren't for obvious reasons, he was more than happy to take a swing at Scott Morrison about something that had nothing to do with his portfolio last week, trying to pretend that there was a quid pro quo from the phone call that he had with Donald Trump, and because he was such a mate of Trump on that phone call, then somehow that's how we got the red carpet in Washington. So he's more than happy to jump out of his lane when he wants to, as if somebody who's always just reminding everyone he's got the ability to deliver a hit that has nothing to do with his policy areas. But Campbell, I mean, you win some, you lose some, how you talk about it, when you talk about it, but to me, having multiple bites of the cherry all seems very orchestrated.
Oh, look, clearly orchestrated, and I guess, as Adam was saying, it's about the mea culpa, trying to say the party's changed, we're going to listen in the future, we're going to go and develop new policies. And, well, we'll have to see if they do. At this stage, any observer would be fairly confident that the Labor Party haven't actually got the lessons of the election. And by the way, I have a bit of sympathy for Bill Shorten because at least he's saying some of this stuff, but there's a whole group of people behind him who egged him on, who told him these were the good policies, the right policies that have resonance and people would vote for them, and they were wrong. Perhaps they should watch more of the commentary on Sky News in the lead up to the next election, and then they could recalibrate their senses because they need a compass about what Middle Australia is really thinking.
Correct.
That's probably the biggest learning for them.
Correct, but they're being told by the great Barry Cassidy, the former Bob Hawke speechwriter, among other things, you must avoid evil media like this. We'll get to that a little later in the show. Last word for you, Darren.
Right-wingers here.
Yeah.
No, just one quick thing. What Bill said then is true, that Labor didn't do as well as expected in Western Australia and particularly in Queensland.
What about Western Sydney? What about Tasmania?
No, hang on. But, well, not a lot of seats changed hands. There are only half a dozen seats.
Well, sure, but you know Tassie, mate. You've seen the campaign in states.
I do not know why Labor, frankly, dropped the ball in those three, and because they would have lost Lions if the candidate had survived for the Libs too, by the way. But my point is this, that if Bill wasn't popular in Queensland and Western Australia this time, he won't be popular in Queensland and Western Australia next time. So if, I hope Albo does very, very well, but if he doesn't, they're going to have to look to someone who resonates in Queensland in particular, and, maybe someone from WA. But I like Bill. But Bill's not going to be leader again. It is not going to happen. Yep. And I don't know whether he's pushing for it. I don't have any inside info, but it isn't going to happen.
But when you say you're going to be around for 20 years, you're not saying it because you plan on being around the sides.
Well, what else are you going to do? I don't know what he's going to do.
He's not going to sit on the backbench for the next 20 years.
Yeah, all right. OK, cool.